Elijah was carried to heaven by a chariot of fire. Can you imagine being taken up to heaven in a blazing chariot of fire and whirlwind? That's exactly what happened to one man in the Bible. But who was he? And why did God give him such an extraordinary exit? Let's dive into this amazing story. Elijah wasn't just any prophet. He was one of the boldest, fiercest, and most faithful messengers of God. He stood up to wicked kings, called down fire from heaven to prove God's power, 1 Kings 18:38, and challenged hundreds of false prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah was a man of extraordinary faith, but he also knew what it was like to be alone, afraid, and worn out. But in his final moments, God showed him just how special he really was. The Bible tells us in 2 Kings 2 that Elijah knew the exact day he would be taken up to heaven. He wasn't going to die like other men, he was going to be taken alive. Elijah and his disciple Elisha went on a final journey, and everywhere they went, other prophets came out and said, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away?" 2 Kings 2:3. And Elisha replied, "Yes, I know, but don't talk about it." This was a holy moment, and something incredible was about to happen. As they crossed the Jordan River, suddenly, out of nowhere, a chariot of fire pulled by horses of fire came racing down from heaven. Imagine flames blazing, the sound of rushing wind, and a divine glow lighting up the sky. The chariot swept between Elijah and Elisha, and Elijah was lifted up in a whirlwind of glory and fire. Elisha looked up and cried, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." 2 Kings 2:12. Then, just like that, Elijah was gone. But why did God choose to carry him away in such a dramatic way? Elijah's whole life had been about fire and power, calling down fire on Mount Carmel, standing firm in the fire of opposition, and burning with a passionate zeal for God. So it's fitting that his departure was marked by a chariot of fire. It was God's way of honoring his fiery faithfulness and saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Plus, Elijah never saw death. He was taken alive straight into God's presence. Before Elijah was taken up, he dropped his mantle, his cloak, for Elisha to pick up, 2 Kings 2:13. This wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of the anointing and authority of God's power. From that moment, Elisha received a double portion of Elijah's spirit and went on to perform even greater miracles. The fiery chariot wasn't just Elijah's final journey. It was the beginning of Elisha's mission. God was saying, "My work doesn't end. It passes on to the next generation." Here's where it gets even crazier. Elijah shows up again in the New Testament. Remember the Transfiguration? In Matthew 17:3, Elijah and Moses appear alive next to Jesus on the mountain. Elijah's earthly departure was not the end. It was just the start of his heavenly mission. He's still part of God's plan, even centuries after he was carried away in that blazing chariot. Elijah's story isn't just about a spectacular exit. It's about faithfulness, fire, and legacy.